It's an honor to be here, and I want to thank Vicki first for allowing me this opportunity. I had gone to Vicki several months ago, and she had complimented some of the quilts I was doing. I said, you know, if you'd like for me to come to a guild meeting and demonstrate how, you know, my method works, I'd be happy to. Well, she didn't say anything, and I thought, well, she likes them, but not that much. Then she came back to me a couple weeks later and said, Rosemary, I want you to do the bed turning. I was so flattered and honored. So Vicki is not just my quilter, but she's my friend. I've known her about 8 years. She's a very wonderful person, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. So I want to get started. The first section is actually pieced quilts, and then I'll work through this. We'll go into pieced and applique mix as I work through the show, but I thought the pieced ones would give you an idea of types of fabrics I use. I like a lot of different fabrics in the quilts and a lot of different colors, so you'll get a flavor for my style when you piece ones. That's not one. That's my drop on the floor so the others can land on it and not get dirty.
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea.
So this first piece one is called Pickle Dish. This is my daughter's favorite quilt, but it was too old to put in the show. She said, Mom, you got to put that one in the show as a judge show. And I said, no, it's too old. They have a age limit on them. So I thought I would include it in the bed turning. And one of the things about this, it's a K Facet pattern from one of his books. And he uses very modern fabrics, and I just picked things from my stash randomly. And I love it because in spite of being so busy, it has a comforting nature about it for me. So I pull this one out when I'm stressed, and somehow or another this quilt consoles me. It gives me a feeling of comfort. So I call this Sigh of Relief. That's the name. I do name all my quilts. So this is, I pulled it out after election day one time. I won't say which one, because I'm not going to get political, but it did make me feel better. The second quilt is actually from Jen. You've heard of Jen Kingwell, the quilters have. She's an Australian designer, and she has very busy quilts that are sampler quilts, lots of different blocks. This was just one block on the quilt, so I ordered what they call a tempter. So you get an acrylic templates to cut out the shapes, but then you have to figure out how to put it all together. You got the block, now what? So it's a bit of a challenge if you don't have a pattern that shows a full quilt. But I was pretty pleased with how that one turned out. I'm especially pleased at the fact that it's a great example of mixing batiks with prints. A lot of people think you're not supposed to mix batik fabrics with prints, but this is about half and half, batiks and prints, and I think they worked out pretty well together. I named that one Crazy Kaleidoscopes.
Is that okay with you? And if you need help,
This is a more traditional quilt with bright colors. I was reminded of those puzzles that test your IQ, how many squares, how many rectangles, and you know, the real smart people can figure it all out. Well, I decided a good name for this would be how many pyramids, but I have not counted them up yet, and if someone wants to count them up and show me how smart you are, I welcome it. But one of the things I wanted to mention on this is I had this border fabric that I couldn't make it work on anything. Here it is. I wanted to use it as a border on a quilt. So I decided finally it was just too much, and I split it down the center. And here's how it looked. It looked totally different. And I was so pleased that I finally found a use for that fabric. I don't know about all of you, but I've got a huge stash and I have some. I'll look at them. I don't know if I'm ever going to use that fabric. Why did I buy it? Then all of a sudden one day, it's the perfect one, for a certain quilt. So that was how that one worked out. How many pyramids? Who's going to count them for me? This next quilt is an example of how I don't follow rules when I make borders. They have these golden rules. You're supposed to have your inner border a certain width, and then the next border is supposed to be 1.6 times this. It's a certain mathematical thing, but I don't do that. Just like the batiks and the prints, I mix those. Well, I make up borders on the fly. And this quilt got long and skinny, and I just kept adding borders to the side, but I like it, it's wild and crazy. So when I decided to name this quilt, because like I said, all of them get a name, I was stumped, and I decided that a lot of these stripes here reminded me of some of my husband's neckties and the polka dots. So back in the days when we were young and worked for the companies that had the big Christmas parties, and the boss would have a party occasionally, one of the famous lines, "Does this party require a tie?" came from my husband's mouth. And it was like the eye roll that came with it. Does this party require a tie? So I named this one, "Does this party require a tie?" Has sort of a party feel about it.
Some of the actual really, really good.
This next quilt is long. It was made to fit a bed, and it did fit a bed once upon a time. I made this for my daughter because she was studying, she had already completed a biology degree at Texas A&M, and she was looking at my fabrics one day, and she said, "Mom, look at all those, it's biology things in the fabrics. You have leaves and flowers and animals and birds, and really when you look at quilt fabrics, a lot of them are nature themed." She said, "I want a biology quilt." So I made this one. Of course, I tried to make it modern because she's young, and she loved it. And she had a pet rabbit, though. I call this the quilt that was overloved. Her pet rabbit got hold of it one day when she wasn't around. So I had to cut off the original border and put a new one on. I have several little places in the quilt that I've had to repair with invisible thread. But you know what? That's what quilts are for, isn't it? They're supposed to be loved. My mother used to say, "Use the quilts." So we do. We use our quilts. And that's mostly, I think that came out of a Kay Fassett book. That pattern is called Border Diamonds. So the name of this is BS in Biology. So I started experimenting with small rectangles in my quilts. I didn't have any patterns, but I had seen the hexie quilts that are always hand sewn, these grandmother flower gardens, and they're using, some people English paper piece them, but I never wanted to tackle that. It just seemed overwhelming to hand piece a whole quilt. So I thought I could come up with these ideas to get these little pieces with rectangles, and I could do chain sewing and just churn them out. So this was one of my experiments with the little rectangles, and I just started laying them out and put in some little edge treatments. So I thought at the end, when I made it, it looked like a trellis. So I named this one "Jealous of My Trellis." I cover up with this one in my chair when I'm in my recliner, taking a break from quilting. And here's another rectangle experiment. And what drove this color selection was this most beautiful backing. I love that backing pattern. That's a tulip pink, I believe. So I made this several years ago, and the browns are actually different fabrics, but they sort of look solid on here if you're not up close to it. But they are different fabrics, and they're not as noticeable as the light colors. So I decided the good name for this was spicing up the brown. A lot of people don't like brown. I have a friend who won't buy a brown fabric, but I like them, you know. I use every color. So that's spicing up the brown.
Beautiful back.
My neighbor came over and I showed her some of my quilts because she was unable to come to the bed turning. And she said, the backs of your quilts are so pretty. And I said, you know, I think it's important to have a pretty back on a quilt. Just for the whole experience. So I do that. In fact, here's another one with a pretty backing.
Oh my.
This was, I bought this fabric and then it went out of print. And then Kay Fassett is a designer, and when they go out of print, when you try to find them online, they double or triple the price on them. And I'm too cheap to do that, so I had fussy cut from this fabric, this part right here, to do the outlines. Well, after I did that, I liked to not have had enough for the backing, and I wanted my quilt to be bigger, but I was limited because I was trying to save out the amount for the backing. So I cut it short. So the previous quilt I showed you, this is the shorter version, so I started adding these borders. I pleaded with Vicki to do diamond quilting just on the border. She said, I don't do custom. I didn't know what to do, so I finally, after sitting on this one about 2 years, I appliqued the diamonds first, and then I was starting to get attracted to doing applique. So I added the little flowers that kind of look like the flowers in the fabric. So I don't know if y'all are familiar with Bob Ross. He's the television artist from the late 80s, early 90s. He had a saying whenever he'd get a smudge on his painting that he was demonstrating. He said, that's not a mistake, that's a happy little accident, because he'd make it into a bush or a building or something else, a tree. So I named this quilt Happy Little Accident because it's what launched my interest in applique, and I think too, you know, kind of made the quilt cuter to put the appliques on there. So this is Happy Little Accident. So after I added to that, I had some old quilts that I'd made that I didn't much like, and they needed something else. And in fact, my cousins are here today, and I had this one off to the side. I didn't want to show it to them. You know, you make some quilts that don't turn out so great. Even Kay Fassett admitted that he makes some that aren't that great. So this one wasn't that great until I added the flowers. And I was just really starting to get excited about applique by this time. And I thought, but how am I going to put flowers? I thought about it for a long time. First I thought I might put a big flower in each of the squares, and it just didn't sit with me. So I thought, well, what can I do? All of a sudden one day I came up with this idea to make freeform flowers so that it wouldn't have to be so precise when I sewed them on. It, you know, didn't matter if they were all just kind of free form. So I call this one 101 Flowers because there are 101 flowers on there. It really helped the quilt a lot. So then I get this idea. Vicki does the edge-to-edge computerized quilting, and I didn't know anyone to do custom quilting, but I wanted to really get into this applique. So I thought maybe I can just sew a blank panel in and come back in and attach an applique panel after it's quilted. So this was my first experiment. In fact, I call it my very first applique panel. There's actually a blank panel quilted underneath that, and then I added this after it was quilted and just did a little running stitch around it. If you choose a busy or a dark fabric, that's doable. You don't have to have custom quilting. So a lot of people are discouraged by having to pay for custom quilting. I'm not saying it's bad, it's beautiful, you know, I love it. But it does cost a lot more than the computerized. So this is a way you can get applique on your quilts because, you know, it takes away from the appliques a little bit if you quilt on top of the pieces. And this is a way you can come back in afterwards and add a panel or random appliques like I did on 101 Flowers. So it's not that hard to do. It's very doable. So I wanted to show these examples. So that one I called, it's such an original name, my very first applique panel. This one I'd made several years ago, and something wasn't sitting well with me on this quilt. It wasn't one I would show my cousins when they're quilters, when they came to visit, because you have your certain ones you show your friends and family, and then you have those that you kind of fold up and put aside. And this was one of them. And the reason I didn't like it was because my stash wasn't very big then, so I didn't like my fabric choices in the very center of the quilt. And then after I learned that I could attach panels after they're quilted, I thought, oh, I can go back and fix that ugly old thing. So I put this panel in. I've only been doing this applique for about 3 years. Some of these quilts are 8 or 10 years old. So I decided I'd spruce this one up and add a panel. So when it came time to name it, I had never named it. I just recently assigned names to all my quilts because I was getting labels for them. I looked at that red flower and it reminded me of a canna bloom. The leaves don't look like cannas, but the bloom did. And it reminded me of Tom's grandmother, because when we were first married, she was still alive until we'd been married a few years, and I loved her dearly. And we'd be riding around, and she just told it like it is. One of those kind of people. Just the oddest things would come out sometimes. And we were riding around one time, and there were these beautiful cannas, and my breath was taken away, they were colorful. I hate those cannas. They're the ugliest old flowers I've ever laid eyes on, and they turn so ugly in the wintertime. So this quilt is named in honor of Grandma. It's called Grandma's Canna Lilies. I don't have a binding on the next one because I'm waiting for it to be reissued. It's a Jo Morton fabric. She does very traditional fabrics, and traditional fell out of popularity. Well, apparently there's interest in traditional fabrics again, so they're reprinting some, or whatever you call it, some of her fabrics. And the one I only had a scrap of is that one right there, and it's coming out in November, and I'm waiting it out to put the binding on here till I can get that fabric. But this quilt is an applique panel. It hasn't been attached yet, only at the edges. And Vicki wanted me to show y'all my blank panel behind there that's quilted. So I'll come in and do a running stitch on this and attach the rest of it. So Vicki wanted me to encourage people to try this kind of a little bit different way of, enhancing your quilts. But I let my husband pick the border fabric and the backing fabric on this. So I call this one Tom's Choices. And this pattern of this quilt is coming up in another one, the next one. So you will see the difference in the way quilts can look with different ways to apply the appliques. This one I made a long time ago, and you learn so much from your mistakes with quilting. I can remember after a while I'd been making quilts, probably years. One day I said to myself, golly, I think I'm sewing more than I'm ripping out now. So, it's you learn from your mistakes. So this one, instead of having the center panel like Tom's Choices, I had this, what quilters call negative space. And I intentionally did that, but after I made the quilt, I didn't think it was that great. The contrast was too strong. So when I learned applique, I came back in and added this bind in the last couple of years. And this one is called Binds All Around. So we're coming up on one that for some reason is one of my favorites. I just love it because it's Christmas, and one of the things I really like about this one is that I designed the panel myself instead of using a pattern from another designer. And you know what fussy cutting is? Fussy cutting is where you see a design in fabric, for those of you who don't know, and you cut the design out to use as a feature in applique or piecing too. So I'm going to hold up this piece of fabric. It's one of those I didn't think I'd ever use. You see that? I was able to fussy cut these stems here. And I just thought that turned out so neat because I thought after I bought that fabric, it's one of those, I don't know if I'll ever use that. That's a big, busy print. So at least I've used part of it now. And this is actually, I was influenced when I designed. I wanted a poinsettia, but there was an old applique. You know, they reprint a lot of the old patterns and they change the designs up a little bit. Sue Garman was a very well-known quilter who actually had, she did applique. She had her quilts featured at the Houston show posthumously because she died young from lung cancer. It makes me wonder if these dyes and the fabrics affect people because she wasn't a smoker. But anyhow, she's pretty well known and had a lot of patterns and books. And so I ordered one of her applique patterns called Coxcomb and Currants, which is a Christmas themed. And I took the design and I added the poinsettia. And I actually fussy cut these little berries too. I don't know if you can see there's little swirls. That really adds a lot of interest to applique when you do the fussy cutting. So I really like this quilt and I named it Christmas in Bloom. Now we're getting into the section which is custom quilting ones. There are certain ones that I just felt were worthy of that because they had light colored fabrics and I couldn't see adding the panel afterwards. This one was driven by a vintage chintz. I think I got this on eBay, but after I ordered, I think I actually made my daughter a dress out of that same fabric back when she was a little girl in the early 90s. You know, chintzes were popular back then. I laundered it first and the sheen disappeared, but that's okay, you know, not to have the sheen. And I love this block. It's called Granny's Choice. And I love the fact that it has the sashing in between that enables you to use all these different fabrics, which I love so much. You know, I love to find things that can enable you to just use a whole bunch of different things. And I love stripes. You probably already realize I like a lot of stripes and polka dots. So I just called this one For the Love of Pink. Look at the back. I like pink. What can I say? My name's Rosemary and I have pink cheeks, so I like pink. My husband buys pink roses for every special occasion. We have pink roses in our wedding. Now, this one, when I went to the Paducah show, a lady was selling stripes, back quarters, which I love to buy because I like to put so many different fabrics in my quilts. I don't really need a whole lot of them. And I thought, what can I do with all those? And I had a few other stripes in my stash that were bigger quantities than just a back quarter. These are not woven stripes, they're all printed stripes. So I found an applique pattern that had flowers with straight edges, so I wanted to make striped flowers. So I looked at this one after I made it, and it reminded me of this beautiful adobe hotel in Winslow, Arizona. It's called La Posada. The backside has a train station. The Harvey girls used to stop there. The front side has Route 66 with these beautiful natural gardens for the native plants of Arizona. They're very pretty blossoming flowers. And this reminded me of that because the hotel's decorated as a southwestern masterpiece. It's beautiful. It's also where, standing on the corner in Winslow, Arizona, right down the street where the Eagles sung.
That's why your corners are so awesome.
Yeah, maybe that's why I made the corner special too. So I named this A Glimpse of La Posada. Now I know this is going to stir up some excitement, this next quilt, because I would like to announce that I have 2 cousins and a sister and a niece here, right here, sitting with us. One cousin came from New Jersey to my show with her sister from Mississippi. My sister lives in Elgin, so she's close by, and my niece lives in Hutto, soon to live in Hutto. And I also want to announce that I have a friend here who is videotaping, who drove here from Kansas City, Brian, and he was my supervisor when I worked for Shell for about 8 years, I think. So I have some very special people here, but the reason I'm acknowledging some of my family members now is because their dad and my dad were brothers. They were born and raised in Louisiana, the great state of Louisiana. And one of my cousins made a Go Tigers t-shirt quilt.
Go Tigers. Go Tigers.
So they go to the football games. LSU fans abound in their families. Their sons, they come all the way from New Jersey to go to those LSU games. So I wanted to do a tribute to my dad, who's from Louisiana, and I wanted to do some besides Go Tigers. On the other side of my family, my Louisiana cousins had done a Mardi Gras quilt. We have quilters everywhere. And I wanted to do the iris because the irises are a wildflower in Louisiana. They grow in the bayous, they grow in the coastal grasses. So I looked for years for the perfect pattern. Couldn't find anything that really did anything for me until my mother had died, and I found a book. Let's see. In the collection many years after my mother passed away. She passed away in 2012, and I didn't have it. I was working and had a daughter and was raising, and I didn't go through the stuff until about 2 or 3 years ago. The books, the bags of things, and I found this book that she had, and I said, "That's the iris I want to do." So this one is a tribute to my Louisiana roots, and I named it Louisiana Native. It's batiks primarily. That's good. I love the irises coming together in a circle. That's what drew me to that pattern, because most of the iris patterns I'd say were just, standing up irises. Okay, we can go on. Got a gaudy back on it. So, that was my tribute to my dad. Then, like I said, going through my mother's things, I came across a bag only 2 or 3 years ago, 10 years after she had died, and I found all these little pieces. Some were just these, several. Some of them she had sewn applique to them. So I wanted to do something as a tribute to my mother. She had done this part of the applique. I did the center part to connect them in a panel. And then I said, well, I got to do it in the colors of the 80s and 90s. My sister took a look at this and said, those aren't my colors. I said, but it's Mother's things. How can you say that? And her favorite was the log cabin. So this is my tribute to my mother, and I call it my Mother's Medallion. So it's custom quilted. I thought it was worthwhile to do that.
The border is stunning.
Yeah. And this one, I didn't know where I was going with this one. I blew up a applique block into a great big panel. So it's like a center panel on steroids. But after I chose my colors, it reminded me of the quilts from the 30s. You know, even though these are not what they call 30s reproduction fabrics per se, they had that feeling about it. So I decided in the applique I would pay tribute. During the Depression in the 30s, the ladies, it was a very prolific time for quilting. Beautiful quilts, even though they had limited resources, they traded fabrics. Sometimes they used the clothing that was worn out. So I decided, since this was turning into sort of a 30s theme, that I would use a little check fabric, a flannel, in my applique that would, you know, be a tribute to the clothing that they used in the quilts back then. So I decided to name this one the Not So Depressing 30s. And we're now to the last one. And actually in the show yesterday, I didn't have it included. I had another one, and I have it off to the side. But I decided to put this one here because you're sort of learning about me. When I go through my quilts, you're learning a few personal things, and this one's personal. This quilt is a tribute to 41 years of service to Royal Dutch Shell Oil Company. I went to the Netherlands 2 or 3 times and fell in love with Delft and the window displays there of the hand-painted blue and white porcelain tiles, plates, bowls, was just breathtaking. So this one's called The Windows in Delft. And I just, used the blue and white theme. It kind of reminds you of I chose a flower that was sort of a Dutch-looking flower, And that's my tribute to 41 years of very hard work. And my job was detail-oriented, and that's why I'm a natural to be a quilter now. Work simplification processes I did at work, so this was a natural for me. And that's the end of the show, but I have several quilts that you are welcome to come up and look at more closely on the stage. I have a collection in the back corner that appeals to some people that are frogs and owls that were collections of embroidery that I made quilts from. You have a question?
Yes. I think you need to show the frogs and owls to everybody.
Not everybody likes that sort of
They
thing.
will, I promise you they will.
You think so?
Yes, ma'am,
It's
they
an
will.
encore. It's an encore.
Okay, I'll be happy to show those.
I didn't realize.
My sister, her nickname for my dad was Frog. It's this one here in the green with the white eyes, because she has white upset eyes, so my dad called her Frog. And she collected frogs of every kind, not just quilts. I made these quilts for her. But these are needlework collections. If you come up later and read some of the sayings on these, they're hilarious. So I didn't have this quilted at the time. I wasn't doing quilting, I just kind of stitched around the blocks a little bit. But she loves her frogs. And then when my husband and I bought our getaway place, we're from Houston. We bought a getaway place in LaGrange about 20 years ago and had a little cabin. And I wanted to decorate it, in a nature theme. And I looked for bird stuff, but I came across owls on eBay, needlework. You would not believe the prolific needlework of owls that was done back in the 70s. So I collected the owls. We can show this one or that one. This one right here is a good one. So then about, 7 or 8 years ago, I had to call my sister immediately. I saw this article in AARP, How Not to Look Old. And you know what it said? It literally said, if you're a woman, don't collect owls or frogs. And the collection stopped instantly that day. We had not collected another one, either one of us.
Beautiful.
So that's an owl. I did have this one recently quilted, so it's got some quilting on it. So there's several of them. I don't know, you want to show the
Yes, show
Does
the
anybody
rest.
want to see any more, or is that
Yes,
enough?
sure.
They're all over there. it's just unbelievable how many variations on frogs and owls there are done rendered in needlework. So what happened before we stopped collecting, I was still looking on, if they got unaffordable because it became, for me to buy the owls on eBay because the shipping went up, and then all of a sudden, owls came back in a few years ago. So those are just, some of them have little sayings, they're just a variety. This is similar to constructing a t-shirt quilt, only it's collected needlework.
Yeah.
I think it's so wonderful that somebody put a lot of time and effort
Yes.
in those needlework, and then their kids sell them for $5.
Yeah, the kids, you know, a lot of this is
And
underappreciated.
now they can just
So underappreciated. I mean, I know, I used to do some needlework. I had a few things, but I know the work that went into all this. And it's so sad that, you know, I think our generation appreciates stuff like this, but there's been a big hiatus. I have been told that some of the young people are now starting to show some interest again in quilts and needlework and hand-rendered things like that.
they sell our ghost our yard sale.
So this one, it's not my best, but I like the fact that I use the tassels on the border. My mother helped me tie all those. I made this a long time ago, and my poor mother, she made quilts, of course, and sometimes I would put her to work. My daughter was in color guard in high school. I think I was in charge of the flags for the color guard during my daughter's 4 years of high school. We made 800 flags, and my mother pressed every one. By that time, my mother was pretty old, and she had Alzheimer's eventually, and she couldn't make her quilts anymore, but at least she could press color guard flags for me. So she helped me tie all those ties.
Whatever she could do. I like those ties.
Here comes another frog. My sister wouldn't stop collecting them, and I said, look, I've got limits on how many quilts I want to do. She loved all those little sayings. If you want to come up and read some of them, it's worthwhile.
It is. It's cute little sayings with every frog.
Housework causes warts.
Yeah.
Let's see.
The one on the other one where the woman's work is never done, that's why she asked her husband to do
It's
so
what,
much.
right.
Look at this one. It's got a frog looking in the mirror. Don't question your wife's judgment. Look who she married. So there's some cute ones on there. Yeah, I didn't have it quilted. Okay, my sister and I are like, some of you may remember back in the 60s, there was a show called The Patty Duke Show. And she played a double role, twins, the nerdy one and the party girl. I'm the nerd. I'm not going to say who. Anyhow, our personalities are different, so the nerd has straight hair, the party girl's got the ringlets. Those are just a
Tell me
few.
about the borders, the ruffles.
So that's what I was getting to. I said, do you want me to bind it just like a regular quilt? Oh no, I've got to have those ruffles on there. So that was very laborious to do that. But that's her personality. And I think that's it. Now, but I do want to mention a few over here. The quilt, that's the pickle dish on the left in the red, white, and blue. Vicki wanted me to include it because it was selected to hang in the Houston show when they had the 50th anniversary and they collected red, white, and blue quilts. I can say mine was selected, but I have to qualify it, so were about 150 others, you know. It was and then the center is just, if you want to look up close, an example of a panel that was attached after quilting. I call that one my November remembrance because it has some flowers that look to me like the red poppies of Veterans Day. It's the colors of November, and Veterans Day being in November. That ugly thing on the far right is the first quilt I made in 1973. Vicki wanted me to bring that one. And over here,
It was your shirts.
oh, it was made, I need to tell you this. When I was in college, we dressed like hippies. I wasn't a hippie, but I wore the hippie clothes, the bell-bottom jeans, the peasant shirts. But when I got out of college, I graduated in '73. I went to North Texas in Denton. And when I got my job at Shell, I was, I'm gonna be all professional. I took all those peasant shirts and used them in that quilt. But I had to buy a few more. There weren't enough. So I went to Cloth World. That was later Joanne Fabrics, which is now sadly gone out of business. But it did endure for a long time because it started out Cloth World, and that was back in the 70s. Sadly, that's what happens to a lot of the quilter craft places. Hobby Lobby's still hanging in there though. Over here, I have 2 quilts in the show that are hand-pieced in the Judge show. This is another one if you want to get a look at another one. It has a little applique on the corners. The reason I added that vine, when I looked at this quilt, it reminded me of a glass of white wine, okay? The color, Chardonnay, and I wanted to name it the Trellis and the Vine. So I had to add the vine applique on the corners. And this one, I'm going to actually pull it out. We'll hold it up. It was a flop because I did the little rectangles and I was going to try to put flowers in them and they looked too pixelated. I wasn't happy with it. So I put some applique leaves on there to soften them. I still didn't like it, but guess what? I came up with a good name for it. I call this one A Decent Proposal because look at the size of the diamond on there. You've heard Indecent Proposal, remember the book in the movie? Well, this is a decent proposal. I have a couple here that you can come and look at. It's nothing to brag about, but just I used some blocks 2 different ways and it's a wholly different look, the same blocks in 2 different quilts. One of them's not finished. But this one I want to show because I call it, I didn't name it this, but I call it the quilt that Vicki saved, my quilter. And the reason is I took it to her, I was trying to be modern. Modern quilts, they don't put borders on them. I took it to her without the border and she said, Rosemary, I'm not going to quilt that unless you put a border on it. Well, I had already made the back and I didn't have any more fabric, so it was a skinny border. But I loved it. I loved that border on that quilt. For some reason, it made the quilt. So this one hangs in my quilting room. And it's very soothing, the colors. I love blue and greens, I guess you noticed. So that Vicki, I have to offer kudos to Vicki for helping me on that one. Any questions? Yes.
When you get an applique on the top layer, or do you go all through?
I catch the batting. I don't go all the way through.
Just catch the
So it's pretty easy to do. Actually, when I do the random appliques, I only catch 1 layer. But when I'm quilting around the shapes, after I attach a panel, I catch through to the batting. I explain all that in great detail in a document that you're welcome to sign up for. I didn't print off copies because I wasn't sure how many I would need, and it costs so much for those toners and everything. So if you'll sign up with your email and phone number over here, I'm going to send everyone a PDF. I know y'all hate that because I hate getting patterns that are PDFs and have to print them off, but it was the only practical way to handle it. But I have a copy of the document here. I've only printed it once. You're welcome to thumb through it, and if you think you want a copy, it explains my applique in great detail, which is a method that is very easy, but it's hand sewn. It's not machine stitched, which I like, It's very fun to do, and it's not so, it's not a hardship like some of the other methods that people used to use. Any other questions?
I have a question for Brian.
Yes,
Where is he?
right here.
Brian, did you have any idea that Rosemary was not working hard enough at work, she could go home. And
Thought did just cross my mind. I have to do all these.
Brian knows I have a good work ethic. We'll just leave it at that, okay?
We'll discuss it later on. Yes, a child, a husband, a full-time job at Shell, but yet,
During 41 years, I could count on one hand how many quilts I made. I started my hobby with great fervor. A year before I retired, I quit buying pantsuits like Hillary's and started wearing these kind of clothes to work, because why buy those clothes anymore? I know I'm getting out of here pretty soon. I want clothes I can wear, you know. I started making a few quilts. I actually made that biology quilt for my daughter. I made her a t-shirt quilt. I didn't bring that one because she lives in Los Alamos. She was here yesterday, so I forgot to mention my daughter and grandson came all the way from Los Alamos. They knew this was a special thing for me to be able to have this opportunity, so I'm really happy to have the family all together. We don't get together like this very often. But I started in 2013 with great fervor. I've retired in 2014. So what you see, I think you're seeing just the tip of the iceberg, because I have given wedding gifts, baby quilts. I have given gifts to family members. They have a lot of my quilts. So this is just the tip of the iceberg, but let me tell you something. The best is yet to come. You ought to see the stacks in my room. They're coming.
Can I join your family? You want one?
I want to say this. I have people who come to me and say, do you make quilts? What do you call it when you do on commission? And I say, I have a lot of quilts I'd be willing to sell, but I don't think you would want to buy those quilts, or you would even want them as a gift, because, you know, everybody makes their losers. And, you know, I have a lot of those. But Kay Fassett said, we have a lot of quilts that aren't very good, too. And he's got the books that sell the biggest and the best, you know. So,
well, I want you to know that your family is extremely proud of you.
oh.
And I'm thankful to the Lord that you were gifted.
My two cousins who are quilting here today, you won't believe the beautiful quilts they're making. It's in the genes, but she didn't get the gene. My sister didn't get the quilt gene. Anything else? And like I said, come sign up for my handout and come up on the stage if you want to take a closer look at anything. And
Close enough to watch the bed turning. But today I was able to watch the bed turning yesterday. So, yeah, come out and see us. We're at the
right,
American
there you
Legion in Giddings.
Very good.